Well, hey, welcome again to another Toolbox Tech Talk. Yeah, it's Sunday again, 2 p.m. here in Melbourne. It's actually 1:30 in South Australia. Yeah, so thanks everyone for turning up again for another Toolbox Tech Talk. And look, I'm going to start with my acknowledgement of our traditional owners here in the Yarra Valley. It's the Wurundjeri people. And I've got had a great lineup of guests over the last few weeks. And once again, another one. This is Eddy May. He's my guest today from South Australia. Look, Eddy's been running a solar and battery installation business for over 7 years. He lives in the beautiful historic town of Glenelg, just on the edge of Adelaide. And it looks like it's a pretty nice day there, Eddy. So here we go. Welcome, Eddy.
We're not doing the sunglasses thing. Okay. Hi, Glenn.
Good. Do you like the thumbnail, the Battle of the Sunnies?
Yeah, I liked it.
I think we've got the colours going too, the gold, the black, You've got the subtle bling.
I have, for sure, definitely. Solar merch, it's one of the most important parts of our industry, I think.
It is. Hey, how's it going there in South Australia? I mean, just before we went live, we were chatting about COVID and the impact on businesses, but how's it affecting your business?
Look, things are going pretty well. Look, we're very lucky in South Australia. I think overall we're a fairly compliant state, or polite state, as you put it. But COVID certainly impacted us. But I think really early in the piece, we sort of formulated some different ideas around how to deal with COVID. And, one of the main things we got out of it was, if we're unsure, let's slow right down the number of installs to the very, very minimal amount to keep the wheels churning. And that way, when you've got erratic sales, which we did have, right? We had no sales. And then people started working from home, and people started ordering solar and battery storage at a really high rate, and then it slowed back down. But throughout all those peaks and troughs, we continued to install at a fairly slow, methodical rate. So the only thing that really changed for us was kind of what was in our pipeline to install, I guess, which enabled us to sort of tick along. And then, when we felt really confident, we could increase those install numbers. And when we feel a bit shy about the whole situation, we could sort of lower them. So that's pretty much what's happened with us. But certainly, I think the real challenge right now for South Australia, I know certainly in other states, they've got many different challenges. But one of the challenges around COVID is in addition to the Delta variant, is actually the current erratic pricing changes caused by dollar fluctuations, and now these problems around importing. I think there's all these other business challenges that are coming from COVID as well.
Yeah, actually, we've got our first question on just that matter, actually. So the bowler, Shaw, he asks, can you also talk on the current panel pricing trend in Australia? So
yeah. Well, look, from what I'm hearing, particularly panels manufactured out of China, we're expecting to see a sort of 15 to 20% increase by the end of the year. And interesting, quite a lot of that is driven by the cost of actually the logistics around bringing those panels in. And you would think that, the cost of a solar panel and then the cost to bring it in, that cost to bring it in would be a very small portion. But it's actually going up by so many times that it's affecting that price a lot. So definitely I'm expecting to see costs rise in terms of either importing panels or even locally made stuff as well. I mean, a lot of gear that's locally made have components from around the world, and those logistics are becoming a big problem. I mean, we've already seen it in the car industry as well. I think it's about to hit us also.
Yeah, and shipping. I hear there's like a bit of a battery drought from some manufacturers. They're finding it hard to get the product onto ships and here to Australia.
Yeah, I'm hearing the same thing. And combinations of either ships being turned around and as a result of that, now they're not leaving. until they've got the absolute confidence and green light that they're going to be let into Australia and be able to offload their payload.
Actually, Bradley just chimed in. G'day, Bradley. Bradley's a regular guest, audience member on this show. In fact, he's been a guest on one of my podcasts a while back. So Bradley's just pointing out the copper and aluminium prices too. Of course, in the electrical industry, those are major components of our products. So that's having a big impact too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Bradley, you're 100% right. In actual fact, just last week we were looking at quite a large commercial install that we've got with fair bit of AC work, and we were talking about that very thing, about if we get around to doing this job at the end of the year or beginning of 2022, will there be a major shift in the cost of cable, and how will we manage that, and also things. So yeah, you're right. Yeah,
cool. So let's first up, I just want to shout out to the audience. We've already had some interaction. That's great. So look, if you're listening to this live and watching it, feel free to ask questions. Give us, a bit of love. You might give us a thumbs up, a heart, or something. That's great. But as we go on, we'll try and interact with our audience as much as possible. So feel free just to fire those questions up, and I can bring them on screen and we can talk about them. But let's go back to Eddy for a moment. Eddy, a little bit about your background. How did you get into the solar industry?
Well, how did I get into it? So basically, my background actually isn't in solar. So very traditionally in solar, you guys quite often come from an electrical background, and perhaps you got together with a mate, and two people started a solar business. And you were saying that before, Glenn, and I 100% agree. That's how I've seen a lot of them start. For me, my background is in banking. I used to work in a bank, actually, in finance. And in 1999, I co-founded a business called My Budget, which is a personal budgeting business. And we took that over 14 years from 3 staff to 300 staff. And my primary role was in software, so looking after the software piece of the business, and in service delivery. So I wasn't in sales or marketing or any training or anything like that, but particularly around the service delivery side. When I finished, I took about a year off work, and I was pretty exhausted, if I'm honest, and I was lucky enough in a position to do that. So I got my golf handicap down. I bought a house on a golf course. Now my golf handicap's absolute rubbish again, but anyway, that's another story. So did all that, did some good things, and interestingly spoke to a mate of mine who also owns a business, and he actually ran a business next door to a company called Unleash Solar, and they were selling, fairly absolute crap solar. And he said to me, who's going to fix these orphan solar systems? And so we started NRG Solar in 2014, and all we did for the first year was fix orphan solar systems. So that was my apprenticeship. Everyone has a different apprenticeship, but my apprenticeship was around, what's the customer's experience? Why are these systems failing? Is it poor product? Is it poor installation? Is it not knowing what the customer needs? Is it not listening to them? And it's a combination of all those things. So that was kind of our education. And then NRG morphed into, selling residential and battery storage and commercial as well. So that's kind of the whole story.
Yeah, I love the story. I mean, I think what you embody is the change in our industry. When I first started being an installer long ago, it really was just like me and a mate doing it, and muddling through with accounts, with software, with sales techniques which were hopeless, and very poor customer service because we were only 2 people. And now the industry's matured, and we have larger businesses that manage large fleets of staff who do all sorts of different things. I was looking at your website. You just told me you got 30 staff. I thought there was only 17 on the website, but you said you've grown so much since that photo's been taken. So there's a lot more now to a solar business than just the electrical side. And all those people are part of that value stream that is ultimately customer focused. And I suppose your financial background really hones that too, that it's all about that customer experience.
Oh, look, absolutely. And I think, one of the things that I guess I developed along my sort of journey around customers was this a philosophy of what I refer to as process-driven customer service. And what that is, it's predicting when the customer is going to need this next piece of information and giving it to them at the right time. So, you know, when you buy a solar system or a battery system, there's a lot to learn. And if I told you everything you needed to know along that journey on day one, you'd forget most of it. But, you know, being able to give it to you at the time, not after you're thinking about it, so it's proactive. It's right at the time beforehand, and we spend a lot of time thinking about that, so that, you know, we are proactive. So we don't wait for customers to call us with questions. We predict the questions that they're going to have, and we feed them that information at the appropriate time. And for us, we find that means that the customers generally get a really good experience.
Cool. Hey, questions are coming in. It's great. Now, this show is called Toolbox Tech Talk, so we've got a technical question, not too technical. It's probably up your alley, really, which is another one from Bowler. He's kind of curious about what wattage is in demand for the residential segment and the commercial segment, presumably here in Australia. And can you share your thoughts on bifacial, glass-to-glass, and glass-to-transparent backsheet?
Yeah, for sure. So currently in Australia, like the sweet spot for residential solar is sort of in that 370 to 400 range, I would say, in terms of the watt panels. Certainly, you know, you do see players out there offering, you know, 450s, but they're the larger form, like they used to be called 72 cell, but they're the larger kind of 2 meter panels. And, you know, I don't allow our guys to put them on residential sites, purely actually from a safety point of view. I think, you know, when you're looking at installing on a residential job, and quite often you're only there for 1 or 2 days, you know, they're a very heavy and bulky panel. They're a 2-person lift. So that's the reason for that. Whereas on the commercial side, you know, absolutely, you know, they can be anywhere from that same 370, which quite often for some commercial sites we do prefer them. But then other times, you know, we're up to 450, and we'll be moving into a 500 watt panel for commercial probably by Q1 next year as well. So, but again, I think you've got to choose your roof for that. So, you know, like the traditional big commercial clip block roof, flat, fairly flat, you know, 2 people can handle those panels quite comfortably. In relation to the bifacial glass on glass, you know, I think I've seen some really large installs, particularly there was a really great install done by Gippsland where they use them, and they're getting some amazing output as a result. But there is a challenge of how you handle them on a large site as well. They're actually, they're not an easy panel to install. So I think you know, the whole project needs to be looked at carefully, and then you can decide from there.
I think you've done a great summary there. I could add a few other thoughts around sizing. Sometimes it comes down to the bizarre magic numbers and how they add up. So, you know, here in Australia with the 133% oversizing rule from the CEC, and, you know, many DNSPs limiting you to 5 kilowatts of inverter power, that makes the 6.6 kilowatt PV system a very popular number. Now, when you look at the voltage windows of inverters, often you want around about 10 panels in a string. So magically 2 strings, 20 panels equals 330 watt. And so 330 watt, a beautiful panel size for that 6.6 kilowatt system. Of course, you can do it with other combinations. But yeah, I totally agree with what you said about size. And now manual handling is becoming an issue. I mean, I remember the days when there were 75 watt panels, you stick them under your arm, you put 2 under your arms, you know, they were tiny little things. And now it's, you know, this, you know, 27, 28 kilo thing that's definitely a bit difficult for one person to move. It's probably unsafe. You can't carry the ladder by yourself. So you've got to start having systems to get these big panels into locations, onto roofs, and manage them. But, you know, they're great for commercial. They span a lot of distance, limit the number of, you know, connections you have to make. So, yeah, so commercial, definitely those 450, 500 watt is kind of what's happening here. Yeah,
100%.
Now, I've got another question. This one's from Ray, also another regular on the show. So shout out to Ray. G'day. Ray asks, Eddie, did you manage to use your software in the solar business?
Yeah, I did use some of it. So, look, the software that was developed around the management of CRM, management of sort of follow-ups, and kind of in our industry we would call it service tickets, I guess. In finance, I'd refer to it more kind of like as a follow-up. It was like a promise that I made to someone that I didn't want to forget, and I wanted to track how long that promise took to be delivered, and what the result was, and how the customer felt. So that part combined with Net Promoter Score, I did bring across, but of course, there's obviously a totally different game. So like for example, the big thing that I think I'm gonna honestly say I underestimated, and I thought I'd just be able to solve it really easily, was stock management. And I've learned some pretty tough lessons around stock management, and particularly in an industry where like panels and inverters fall off of approved lists, and things get out of like they get out of vogue, sort of thing. Like, I mean, I'm probably still got 250 watt panels in my warehouse somewhere, as an example. And you kind of you learn sort of. I learned as I went there. So yeah, I did take a lot, but I needed to rebuild a lot as well. So, and we did build a lot of software ourselves for the management of those CRMs, and everything through to stock and job costings and things like that. And now that that's gone full circle and I'm happy with it, the next iteration for us is to how to bring that up and put it all into it's all in the cloud now, but how to take me out of the picture, and be able to use third party software and to start to integrate like that, so we can continue to scale.
Yeah, like many businesses, know what you do well and outsource what you don't, and be efficient about it. So another question's coming in, but just where are we? Yeah, this one's from Brendan. Now, a little bit, I think Brendan's misspelled it. I think he meant to type in CEC limitations, and this is probably a response to what I was saying about the 133% rule from the CEC guidelines. Can I give you a little backstory on this? I don't know if you know this story. I actually used to be on the CEC Standards and Training Committee, STA Committee. And back then, when we wrote the guidelines, they were literally just rules of thumb. Like, this is a good idea if you do it this way. They weren't enforceable rules. They weren't tied to a rebate structure. And one of those was this idea that there's a kind of optimum size for a PV array with respect to the AC power output of an inverter, so that you wouldn't get clipping. And initially that was listed at that you should have at least 80% AC output power to the peak watts of the array. And that was then changed down to 75% AC power to the peak watts of the array. And if you do the inverse of that, it's effectively 133% oversizing of your PV array's standard rating to the AC output power. Now, by accident, you could say the fact that the CEC guidelines are a requirement of compliance to the CEC Code of Conduct, which is a requirement for the creation of small technology certificates, effectively makes it a rule. So that's how we got it. The question is it likely to be challenged soon? I doubt it. It's been there for a long time. I think we just have to live with it, unless there is moves that I don't know about. So there you go. That's my 2 cents worth. Eddy?
Yeah, no, I agree with you to some degree, except to say that I think Michael made a point, 150% with a battery is correct. And therefore, particularly in my neck of the woods in South Australia, currently about a third of our residential work involves a battery. So it's either retrofitting a battery to a system that we built a few years ago, or building a new solar system with a battery. So like last year, we installed probably over 500 Tesla Powerwalls as an example, plus other battery storage as well. So in those scenarios, we do deploy the 150% rule, and so that is starting to shift a bit. But look, I think with STCs falling, I think whatever rules are around them are going to stay now until I don't think anyone's challenging too much there.
Yeah. I mean, the whole scheme runs out in 2030 very slowly. Multipliers drop every year. I think before 2030, we'll probably not even consider STCs a major incentive anymore. So yeah, that might just change the ballpark. Thanks for those questions and comments, people, and thanks, Michael. Shout out to Michael. He's actually lives nearby me, so g'day there. So going back to you, let's look back at the industry for you. What have been some of the highlights of being in the solar industry?
Look, a couple of things. In South Australia, a few people don't really know some of the achievements that have happened in South Australia, but to be part of it has been pretty exciting. So the first one was on the, well, not the first one, but a major one was on the 11th of October 2020. And that was when South Australia became the first gigawatt scale solar powered system to run on 100% solar, right? And that's a world first. And to be here installing rooftop solar in a state where, and it was only for an hour, but, you got to start somewhere, right? So, and what's interesting actually about that, there's some interesting things around that, because the first one is that, it was all rooftop solar. That every other generator was turned off at that point, and it was supplying our entire state.
Hey, Eddie, have you got the graphic for this? Could you just flick it up and I'll share it, because it tells the story beautifully. I think it's a proud moment when your state runs the state with absolutely 100% renewable energy. That's phenomenal. I mean, as you pointed out, first in the world. I can remember 10 years ago, engineers saying it's impossible to get beyond 20, 25%. That was AEMO's kind of prediction. It would be the whole network would fall over if we went over 25% renewables mix. But now we've found ways through, smart control of inverters, of being able to curtail generation when it's not needed, controlled loads, and a whole rich mix, including wind and solar, being able to do all those things together. So there we go, we've got it coming up. Cool. So that's can you zoom in a little bit just to make it a little bit bigger?
I'm just trying to work out how to do that. Did that work?
Beautiful, beautiful. There we go. There's that light yellow rooftop solar in the middle there.
Yeah. So what's interesting on this day actually was this last little dot point, which is kind of hidden down there. Greater than 50% of substations in reverse flow, and so that shows you, while on one hand, how exciting for South Australia to be the world's first network to be run to supply our whole state on 100% rooftop solar. But at the same time, there's this sort of underlying warning, greater than 50% of substations in reverse flow, right? So that means we needed to move really quickly, because once an event like this happens once, it happens more frequently, and then eventually it becomes the norm. So how do we deal with reverse flow? So that is some of the kind of interesting things that have happened in our state, and some of them have been challenges, particularly around like the smarter home regulations, flexible export trials. There's lots of things going on in that space to sort of work through what to do about that scenario.
Actually, don't lose that picture. I might get it to bring it back in a minute, because I've got a sort of a related issue, which is now AEMC passed and approved a rule to allow retailers to charge for exported energy. And there's been a bit of backlash. What's your feelings about that?
My feelings around that one now, do you want me to bring this back up or not?
We'll just put it on the side there, and I'll bring it on when we need it.
Yeah, okay. Share it. Well, I might not be able to get it back that easy. But anyway, in answer to your question, yeah, certainly one of my feelings around charging, is that what you mean for export?
Yeah.
Look, I think, Glenn, that the days of solar really needing STCs and feed-in tariffs to survive are over. Solar needs to stand up on its own 2 feet, and South Australia is a great example. We've got such a difference between the sort of peak price of power and then the low wholesale price of power, that you can really be very self-sufficient with a solar system now. It's all about self-sufficiency. And if you want to make money, a smarter home can sort of work within that. But if you think about that scenario that I just showed you then, when we're in reverse flow, there's 2 ways to deal with that, right? And way number 1 is the government and the powers to be who are running that network, so the SA Power Networks in this case, could be, don't put any more solar on because we can't handle reverse flow anymore. It's too dangerous. Or it's got to be something else. And from my perspective, I'm not against having a cost, because once you've got that infrastructure in place to charge for exporting to the grid, it doesn't necessarily mean that every single day. There are many, many days of the year the grid needs solar and will pay quite handsomely for it. So I think, I'm not opposed to it.
Yeah, what I meant about that graph you showed me is that, as you pointed out, you reached 100% on that day, a beautiful sunny day, met all the load. But, jump forward 10 years and with the growth that we've got, you could actually have 200%, but you can't have 200%. There is nowhere to put it. So you've got to have some means of controlling that surplus generation. And that's what export limiting is really all about. And also price signaling that it's about self-use, not trying to sell it to a network who doesn't want it. So, as we were talking before the show started, these incentive programs have been great for kickstarting the industry. We need to stand on our own 2 feet, and it's all about self-use and stored energy these days for the residential customers.
It is, and that's why it's so critical that we, as a country, get behind the importance of virtual power plants. I'll give you an example. We recently, just only a few months ago, do you remember? Yeah, obviously you wouldn't remember. In 2016, our whole state lost power for 2 days, and
another world first.
Now that was another world first. That one was one of our glory days, sure. But I think it shows you sort of how quickly the renewable transition has snuck up, and if you think, people are like, why? How did that even happen, right? And quite simply, decades ago when the network was built, it was built for one power station to supply many homes and businesses, so one to many. But of course, as we put more solar and battery storage on, every single one of them is a power station. So now you've got many to many, and it's a totally different, so the network is being used in a way that it wasn't designed. So that happened in 2016. Well, in March, just this year, we had pretty much the identical thing happen again. But, this time we didn't lose power, because what actually happened was we had a VPP, we had large batteries. We were able to actually curtail 12,000 homes solar for about 4 hours, which was all that was required to keep the lights on. And, customers at the outset were like, I don't like the idea of people turning off my solar. But I think what you've got to remember is that when we lost power for 2 days, everybody's solar was off at that point, and actual fact, so was their fridge and their lights and their internet, right? So to lose a bit of solar for 3 or 4 days out of 365 days worth of solar, or 3 or 4 hours out of 365 days worth of solar, is a very, very small price to pay to not slow down the transition of renewables.
Edwin just made a comment. Edwin, g'day, Edwin. He says, what does it say? Truly run on purely renewables. I imagine that synchronous generators were still running those. I love it. Training wheels are not easy to shed. I mentioned. So, I mean, that graph really was the energy dispatched onto the network. So,
yeah.
It's kind of what it is. And Bradley adds also, does storage or dispatchable power need to match the 24-hour or some other figure requirements?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think there's probably quite a lot of different ways to look at it. I'm not really 100% sure how to answer that, because, quite simply, we need a blend of a number of things. And, quite often what I see, in Facebook posts and in the media is, the idea to here's the answer, or this is the solution that we've all been looking for, when really, in my opinion, the solution that we've all been looking for is a very big combination of lots of dispatchable power, but also lots of storage, right? Whether that be in hydro or hydrogen. A lot of people will say hydrogen's an absolute waste of money. Well, hydrogen can soak up surplus energy very, very quickly. And maybe you can't make as much money from it right now selling it, but maybe its primary role right now is to stabilize the grid. And I think there's going to be some big plays there. So I think, I think it's a combination of a lot of things.
Are you planning on getting into hydrogen?
I like the idea of it.
Yeah, it scares some people, but every technology looks scary until you've worked with it, developed safe methodologies. I mean, I often say that if cars ran on gas and then someone came up with this amazing idea to run them on petrol, and all you do is poke it through a hole in the side of the vehicle, open vented, and tell kids that not to smoke, would you ever get it approved? Probably not.
Absolutely, it's exploding at such a rapid rate of knots inside of your engine every time you drive it. Yeah, it is. It's an interesting way of looking at it. Yet we're very fearful about a battery.
So this is probably out of your territory, but Ray just notes that in the Northern Territory government is offering only rebates for solar and batteries. I wasn't aware of that one. No rebates for solar only.
I wasn't aware of it either, actually, Ray, but that's exactly what needs to happen. In actual fact, we'll be doing some testing in the upcoming months in South Australia, installing batteries without solar and having a look at how they can interact with the grid. And just seeing exactly if we can turn them on to act like a VPP, hook them into a wholesale power retailer like Amber as an example, then what actually would the ROI be? So I think that's pretty forward thinking of NT.
So are you saying you're going to do your own VPP? You're going to aggregate those battery systems?
No, I'm not going to do our own VPP. We've actually already turned one on a few months ago. So what we did was we used the Tesla Powerwall. We used an algorithm very, very similar to that of the Tesla VPP, but it's connected to Amber Electric's retail energy plan. So so it's actually charging and discharging from the grid based on how all the other batteries in a VPP does, but the customer gets the benefit of it, and we're just watching that. Of course, solar's got to play a part in that, and it sometimes it can have a negative impact. If the price goes into the negative, you don't want your solar discharging into the grid, as an example. So yeah, we're taking a look at what that might look like just as a battery alone.
I think New South Wales was minus $22 a megawatt hour yesterday. I mean, you didn't want to sell energy into the grid at a negative pricing.
No, turn everything on in your house and you'll be doing okay.
Yeah, although we don't have demand tariffs where you get paid to consume energy yet, but other countries do. Hey, just for those not familiar with Amber Electric and their model for retailing electricity, can you give a thumbnail sketch of it?
Yeah, sure. So the way that Amber work is they charge a monthly subscription fee. I think it's $15 a month at the moment, and then they and then your tariff is based on the wholesale price of electricity, right? So, and that can fluctuate all the time. So quite often it goes into the negative during the day because of like high renewables, and at night time it can be more expensive, right? So, but with a smart home you can utilize some, at that time when I spoke about that event that happened last March, actually the day beforehand we had a fire in a switching station here in South Australia, and it caused the price to go up to $15, $15,000 a megawatt hour, or $15 a kilowatt hour, right? So, so at that time, if you were consuming power, that would have been sort of quite expensive, but it was a very good time to export, right? Because there was a loss of power. The grid needed everyone to chip in. So all the VPPs in the state were pumping out power into the grid, and it actually kept the lights on in our state. If you were with Amber at that time, you would have been paid that money directly off your, as a credit.
So using a battery in combination with Amber's dynamic pricing allows you to get the best value out of that battery by just it's really like a financial system, isn't it? Trading stocks, going up, going down. Buy,
exactly,
sell.
Exactly, Glenn. It's that's the best way to describe it. If you're the sort of person that likes to buy and sell really quickly in a stock market, that's exactly what your battery's doing. But the algorithm that's been programmed into it, it's called Amber called theirs Smart Shift. So theirs is that's how theirs works, right? So, and of course, in a state like South Australia where we have those very big, price fluctuations, there's more to make. In a state where the fluctuations aren't as much, there's probably a little less to make. But I think the more renewables that come in, the more fluctuations you'll see, because obviously wind and sun, they're the things that sort of generate those fluctuations.
Actually, one of my previous guests on this show, Sam Frost, he's a big fan of Amber, and what he does is use it to choose when to run his crypto mining. And so he actually, I think he's developed an algorithm to automatically run the miners whenever the price is right. So he's not only consuming energy, but he's generating income from that crypto as well.
Oh, that's amazing. And and on top of that, you can imagine that he's actually, when he's doing that, he's doing it at the most sustainable time, because generally when prices are low, it means there's lots of renewables in the grid. So he's probably generally doing that mining of renewables. So there's that underlying sort of factor that's happening as well.
Hey, let's turn a bit to the products that you sell. Now, a question I often get from random members of the public is, particularly when I give a speech to the general public about solar and how it works, people come up to me during the dinner break or the tea break and go, "Glenn, what's the best solar panel? Or what's the best battery?" Do you have any views on the kit you use and why you use it?
Yeah, well, look, we predominantly sell Enphase micro inverters and Fronius string inverters. So I love Enphase, particularly for their design flexibility. You can put you can put a panel in any direction. Like you can just do whatever you want with an Enphase, and it's fine. And kind of, you don't have to think about those oversizing rules, because you've got one micro to one panel. You just continue to go on. And also for customers that, maybe know that their situation's going to change in the future and they're going to probably buy an electric car and they're probably going to do this and that, an Enphase system gives them some great flexibility to add on down in the future. And we also sell Fronius. I'm a 100% Fronius fanboy, as most people who know me know that I am. So right now, I guess my favorite piece of kit would be the Fronius Gen 24. And I think we installed one of the first ones in Australia quite some time ago now, in a beta trial with Fronius and BYD. And, it's just it's amazing to install. It's really efficient. It works really well in all sorts of conditions. And there's something about it that a lot of people don't realize that is about to hit the market. And there's two types of Gen 24s. There's the Gen 24 and then there's the Gen 24 Plus. So the Gen 24 basically isn't capable of having a battery connected to it without a software unlock. So what that means is you can buy a Gen 24 for about the same price as a standard Fronius. And then later on down the track, you can add a BYD battery. You can purchase the unlock of the hybrid part of that inverter and turn that into a Gen 24 Plus.
Wow, I wasn't aware about that. I've got a Simo here, a Gen 24 Simo with the BYD HVS. Love the combination. They look like they're made for each other. But even the color coordination's the same, and the form factor, and the heatsink. It's a shame you have to put the cover on. It's just such an awesome looking heatsink on the Gen 24.
I agree with you. I actually, I was trying to think of a way to make my own cover that was like see-through or something like that. I reckon for an inside installation, I might even do that at my own house. Actually, probably Fronius won't love that, so I'll just do it at home, guys. But certainly, yeah, I agree with you. But yeah, look, a lot of people don't realise. So that's about to hit the market at the end of the year. So people who want a true kind of battery ready system, they don't have to pay for the hybrid inverter part of that right now. And also, Glenn, what you actually get with the standard Gen 24 is you get what's called PV point. That still comes with it. So what that means is that your installer can install a power point next to the inverter, and if you are in a blackout, even though you've got no batteries at all, you could run an extension cord into that power point, and you can utilize the power from the sun during that blackout.
Yeah, I was amazed that when that first became a thing. I didn't ever think that an inverter without a battery could actually still supply a load, AC load. But what do you know? I remember the early Solar X's and a few others did the same thing, the NEDAPs, and now it's actually a pretty not unusual feature to have solar only with backup when the sun's shining.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So you got a picture, I think, of a system too. I was going to ask you a bit about your battery installations. I don't know if you've got that handy, the one with the beautiful black bars.
Yeah, let me just see if I can find a way to share that guy with you.
While you're looking for it, this is a comment from Edwin. All the big mining players are getting behind green hydrogen. Yeah. Green hydrogen, if you haven't heard the term, is hydrogen made from renewable sources, whereas blue hydrogen is made from fossil fuels because you can make it from various sources. Okay, there's that picture. Well, tell us about this one.
Yeah, this is an install that we have recently done. Now, I know that I saw actually in the middle of all of researching this, I watched one of your videos, Glenn, because you got one of these batteries pretty early, right?
Mm-hmm. It's pretty much the case always. Yep.
Yeah. So there's an NRG battery was selected by our customer, and this particular system looks like an off-grid system, right? Three-phase. You can see it's three-phase, 3 electronics, a SIMO. It's got 15 kilowatts worth of sun power, Maxion panels on the roof. Like it's got all the bells and whistles. But this particular customer is a gaming computer programmer, so like has substantial interest in software. He has an absolute strong passion for renewables and sustainability. Recycling was a very, very big part of his decision, as well as country of origin. And of course, you know, when he's in the middle of the night and he's got a deadline and he's programming, you know, having power available to him, again, very, very important factor. So I guess what the interesting thing about this is that sometimes, you know, people are looking purely for ROI and, you know, like a 2-year payback or whatever the case is. But, you know, I think there's still plenty of people out there that have sort of very varying needs for solar and battery storage. And this actual installation we did in conjunction with Josh Shepherd. So absolutely great installer, lives on Kangaroo Island. He came over to the mainland and helped us with it. And, you know, an absolutely terrific result, one that we're very proud of.
Josh is probably watching today. He's a regular in the audience. So shout out to Josh if you're there. Beautiful looking job. Is it all backwired?
Yeah. So it is. Yeah. So we built that wall. We removed the wall lining that was there. We removed that wall. In actual fact, there's hidden panels in this black wall that you can't really see. I think you can't really see right here, but certainly, yeah, there's hidden panels that reveal some fusing and some cabling and stuff like that as well. So everything's accessible if we want to expand on this in the future.
So for those who don't know this energy company, the battery's called the Aeon. So these are what, 1.9 kilowatt hours, nominal 52 volt. It can be mounted vertical, horizontal, more or less any orientation you like, as long as the circuit breaker is not up towards a source of rain. So they're rated for outdoors as well. And they can be paralleled like you've done here with 7 of them. Awesome looking product. So why did you choose this product in this case?
Yeah, interesting. This particular one, the customer actually came to us from Zenergy. So he had already made contact with them and decided that was the battery for him. And he then asked, you know, who in South Australia could he go to be able to build out his entire solar system. So they actually contacted me and said, look, would I be interested in taking a look at their battery? And we started the design from there. And in reality, I would say between myself and the customer, the design process might have gone through a number of iterations for a couple of months before we even started the installation. And you know, we're super happy with the result. So it was kind of not really, I didn't really know too much about it until Zenergy had come to me. But, you know, there's I mean, one of the videos I watched, they drove a car straight over the top of this battery. I don't know if you saw that video, but, you know, it's housed in a very strong sort of environment. It's bulletproof. It's got a very long warranty, 20 years. You know, and it's a great Australian product, I reckon.
It feels like you're handling torpedoes. They're, you know, 1.6 meters long from memory, about 35 kilos or so. Yeah, they're quite an interesting thing. So also you mentioned ROI on a system like this. I totally agree. I mean, what's the ROI on a Maserati?
Oh, that's exactly right. I mean, I had this exact conversation when I was doing something with Solar Quotes a couple of weeks ago. You know, it's like, well, Finn, you drive a Tesla. Like, what's the ROI on that? You know, and sometimes you just want what you want, right? And when enough features stack up for you, it's not always about ROI.
Hey, I noticed you're one of the top-rated companies in Adelaide on Solar Quotes. Well done.
Yeah, thanks. We we put like I mentioned before, we put a lot of effort into like the customer experience and the customer journey. I think, fixing orphan systems for so long, like your heart melts for people that have thought they've bought I don't think anybody ever intentionally says, I know this system's crap that I've just bought, but I can't wait to have it put on my house. I think there's a lot of misinformation out there. So for us, we take people's purchase very, very seriously and try and give them a great experience. And as a result of that, we get great reviews. So that's good. Thanks.
Hey, coming back to sort of some things unique about South Australia, you were the first state to introduce the voltage-dependent power reduction requirements. What's your experience of that?
It's a great question, actually. I mean, one of the challenges for us is that our favourite Fronius Galvo was always the go-to inverter when we were swapping them out, and that one didn't comply with those regulations. So that was a little bit interesting. Like, where do you find sort of transformer inverters that also complies with that? So that was a bit difficult, but we tend to experience high voltage more than low voltage, but the difficulty is, and it makes common sense, when you've got low voltage and then you turn off solar systems because of low voltage, you now got even lower voltage than what you had before, right? So it was a little bit of a scramble for some inverters to comply with it, but most of them already had it inherently built in. So certainly Fronius and Enphase from our perspective didn't have to do too much to be able to comply. But it's difficult because as you'd imagine, most phone calls we would get into our tech support is about high grid voltage versus low grid voltage, right? So, but I think it actually is it was just an interesting thing. Why turn off a solar system for low grid voltage, right? So, we don't see a lot of it.
Right. Yeah, I remember having a sort of discussion on the standards committee with a network engineer from one of the DNSPs, and they're basically saying we want inverters to do only good. We don't want them to kind of muck stuff up for us, and being able to get them to do good things and help the network, which is part of that voltage dependent power reduction requirement, is a bit like Google's motto. What was it? Don't do evil, do only good, or something. That's what they want inverters to do. And, so you're kind of in a way helping the network, but you're also helping the customer because it doesn't turn off. I mean, we know it's about a 2-minute restart when they do turn off due to high grid volts, and you get these horrible gaps in your production curve all day long, and the customer says, why is it being turned off? So, yeah, you're kind of acknowledging that we're reaching some saturation and that the inverter has to be able to respond to that. Yes, particularly on those 100% renewable days. Now, there's a question for you actually here from Brendan. This one is, would he spelled Eddy right? Like that. Recommended as a cost-effective battery inverter solution for the 8.2 kilowatt Fronius Primo.
Well, so it's single phase already. So most likely you're probably in a state where you've got export limiting in play. So I think first thing, you probably want a battery that's capable of drawing at least 5 kilowatts, because if you've got a small, sometimes cost effective isn't always, they actually separate because sometimes when they're the right cost, they aren't effective, right? So from my perspective, I would lean towards a Tesla Powerwall. Now, they may not always be the cheapest battery in the market, but they'll be able to deliver you that 5 kilowatts of capacity. So that means if you are export limited and your system is actually producing, 8 kilowatts, and your house is only sort of using sort of one or two, it can actually charge that battery at its full capacity. Some of the other batteries that are a little more, what you might say, driven on the cost side, aren't always capable of taking that large amount of power. So, for me, there's many benefits with the Tesla Powerwall. Here's an interesting thing that many of you won't know, and that is that in South Australia, if you connect your Tesla to the VPP at the moment, and you go on a plan called the Tesla Energy Plan, where effectively through Energy Locals, Tesla become your retailer, Tesla will warrant your Tesla Powerwall. If you stay on that plan for 15 years, they'll warrant your Powerwall for 15 years. And it's a really big show of commitment towards they've seen their batteries play out in VPP environments. And I think obviously that the natural question Tesla would have had at the beginning is, how much damage are we going to do to this battery, thrashing it in and out of a VPP? Well, they've done thousands and thousands of batteries in the field now, and they've come out and said, you know what, we'll take the warranty to 15 years on our VPP, which is a great show of commitment to how long they think their battery will last. So cost effective doesn't always mean long lasting, I think we all realise. So that's my tip.
I really like that analogy. Cost effective often don't meet up if you're trying to get this down and keep this up. Yeah, they're often mutually exclusive. Yeah, okay. So we've talked a lot about the grid systems and your experience with them, but what about off-grid? Do you do any off-grid systems?
Yeah, we've built some off-grid systems. In actual fact, I don't want to make it Tesla Day, but we've actually just been accredited as an off-grid installer for Tesla, and we are about to, I think in the next week or two, so you'll see some stuff come up on socials, but we're about to build our first Tesla off-grid. Before that, we've used Victron with BYD. We've got an off-grid not too far from our office, actually, which is a Victron BYD, which hums along, and it's really awesome situation. We've built off-grids with Selectronic as well. And, certainly the one that I just showed you is absolutely an off-grid system. It just so happens we've connected it to the grid in this case. I think I've got a keen interest to watch Tesla play out in the off-grid space. We've turned the main switch off on a number of Teslas and watched them go for quite long periods of time effectively in an off-grid environment. But our first full-blown off-grid install for Tesla will happen in a couple of weeks. All right.
Oh, cool. I did a bit of a role play. I won't do it on you, Eddy, but I did it with the other Eddy just last Sunday with Eddy Springer, where I pretended to be a customer ringing up wanting an off-grid system. It can be quite a challenging experience trying to explain to people how different it is designing for off-grid as opposed to on-grid.
Oh, look, absolutely. And I think some of the things that, the one thing that, I like about the systems nowadays that you probably didn't have the real benefit of back when you were first building off-grids, Glenn, is the how intuitive the apps and the monitoring are for people to really understand and adapt their life to the system, the power system that they have. But certainly, you don't need to role play it with me again, because that's that idea of I want to live like I'm on grid, but I want to pay for a system like it's on grid, but I want it off grid. Well, that just there's no such thing.
Yeah, look, I do remember the days when all you got was a voltmeter, an analog voltmeter, and a current meter, and that was your way of monitoring your system. So you got to kind of think, oh, gee, we're down to 46 volts. Things are pretty dire. Light's about to go off. That was about the only piece of information you had. You had no idea what your state of charge was most of the time.
Yeah, exactly right. So I think, and I think one of the things that's attracted me towards the Tesla is that, like the one that we're building, the guy's effectively building his shed first, then he's building half his house for him to live in, and then the major part of his house will sort of follow. So you're putting 2 power walls in the shed install to provide power for construction and charging his power tools and all that sort of thing, and for him to get a feel what's going on, but totally set up to be able to scale that all the way to 10 more power walls. depending on what he wants. So I think, that's a terrific feature as well, because that's not always that easy with traditional off-grid systems, as you'd know.
Hey, we're coming towards the end of the show, and I thought a question that I get a lot, and maybe see what your response is people just say to you blankly, "Should I get solar?" They're a residential customer. How do you approach that kind of question?
I think, look, first of all, the answer is a straight out yes. But simply my simple point is that if you buy a solar system that's designed for 10 years, then you cannot any longer argue that the cost of the energy that you'll get from that system over the 10 years, and even if you blend it with a battery, is cheaper than you buying it from your retailer right now without solar. And I think even though wholesale prices go up, they go down. How often do you actually, every year, every government says they've improved the price of power, but your power bill still goes up. That's the thing. I don't know where it's going in the mix, but the reality is that, mathematically, you can't buy electricity any cheaper than you can from a solar and battery system that's connected to your home. And I think on top of that, the actual feeling of sustainability, self-sufficiency, and absolutely doing the right thing by the environment and our future generations, it's no longer a byproduct. I think it's really top of mind for a lot of people. And, certainly, if you talk, the kids are talking about it at school, they're learning about it, they're coming home, their parents have installed a battery, they know what's going on. And I think it's really important. So that's how I answer it.
Yeah, given the interest rates at the moment, if you've got a bit of spare cash, would you put it in the bank and earn 1%? Or do you think something else to do with it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like in South, for me, quite often, the actual physical return on investment of your solar system in SA is often 3 years or thereabouts. And if you blend it in with a battery, and even though, like Finn Peacock and those guys would hammer me over blended ROIs, I don't care. If you blend it in with a battery, it might be 5 years, and then 6 years, whatever the case is. Certainly they're the numbers in SA because of our high price of electricity. It might be more in other states, could be 8 years, but the fact of the matter is that it's still a way better return than you're going to get your money in the bank, plus all the other added benefits. And guess what? If the lights go out in your street, all your neighbours are looking at you going, how come Glenn's got power?
How do you value that? How do you value that autonomy, that independence, that clean energy? It's not a simple one to put a dollar value on, but it's real, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I don't know how you put a value on it, except to say that, once it's happened to you, and, like I was actually out at dinner last night with some friends that have got a Tesla, and he told me his missus was blow drying her hair, and he went in there, he said, come outside with me. And she's like, I'm not coming outside. Come outside into the street. So eventually she comes in the street. She looks around. She's like, why is it so dark out here? And he's like, we're the only house in the street that's got power right now. And then he said to me, I think we need to get a second Tesla. And I'm like, what for, mate? You're doing just fine. He goes, I don't know, but I love it so much. So I don't know. What is the value of that? I think there's a lot of value in that just that cool factor, right?
I think I can tell the same story. In 2009, I had my very first backup system on grid for a customer. It was a residential home. And I think back then it cost $23,000 for what was probably about a 2.5 kilowatt PV system, a small lead acid battery bank in his garage. And after rebate, he got $8,000 back. So, it was $15,000. That's a lot of money to pay for a backup system. But he rang me up and he said, Glenn, the power went off in the street the other day. We're the only house with the lights on. people started coming around and asking why we had power and they didn't. And he said he rolled up his garage door and said, "This is why." And he said, "That's my proudest moment, was to say it was worth the $15,000 just to kind of boast that he had power when no one else did." So yeah, it's true. People will pay for that level of independence and confidence. And if it's your business, like your customer who's the gaming developer, it really matters. He's out of business if the lights go out. So, and he's got a deadline and he could have penalty pricing. So, yeah.
What's street cred worth?
Yeah,
I don't know. It's something.
Yeah. It mightn't be a Maserati, but it gives you a better feeling. Well, thanks very much, Eddie, for coming on Toolbox Tech Talk this Sunday. It's been great having you.
Look, it's been my pleasure, Glenn, and thanks very much for inviting me. And if anyone's got any more questions, shoot them through, and Glenn and I will get back to you. But thanks very much, Glenn. It's been fun.
Cool. All right. Well, I'll just roll the outro and I'll see you at a show sometime, Eddie.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. If we ever have one, for sure.
Yeah. Okay, well, that was another wrap for Toolbox Tech Talk. Look, big thanks to Eddie and also to everyone who's viewing this live for turning up. Actually, it's a really good audience today, lots of questions. And of course, if you're not watching this live, still post questions because we'll be monitoring the chat. I just want to remind people that I've got a couple of other channels that you can interact with me on too. So I have a YouTube channel where it's Smart Energy Lab, where I've got a lot of free content that you can watch. It's a mixture of reviews and training, and also all the Toolbox Tech Talks going back for over a year now. You can follow me on Twitter. I don't tweet much, but occasionally there'll be something on there. And also on Insta, I see some fun pictures. So there's some other ways of interacting. But yeah, number one probably is YouTube. That's where I spend most of my time. So yeah, thanks everyone, and hope to see you next Sunday, 2 p.m. Melbourne time on Toolbox Tech Talk for another guest. I won't tell you who it is, but it's another state, another interesting member of the solar industry. Okay, we're out.